hate-motivated crimes that shook America, full list and real justice outcomes. Welcome back to Justice Reversed, where real crimes meet real justice. Today, we uncover true stories of brutal hate crimes, innocent lives targeted for their race or religion. Number 1. Frazier Glenn Miller Jr. He spent decades hiding behind hate, but it took just one spring afternoon for the world to see the face of evil. Frazier Glenn Miller Jr., a self-declared white supremacist and former leader of the Ku Klux Klan, was 73 years old when he loaded his shotgun, drove to a Jewish community center in Overland Park, Kansas, and opened fire. The date was April 13, 2014, Palm Sunday. His targets were clear. "I wanted to kill Jews before I died," he would later tell investigators. But in a haunting twist, all three of his victims were Christians. Outside the Jewish Community Center, Miller shot and killed William Lewis Corporon, 69, and his 14-year-old grandson Reed Griffin Underwood, a talented high school student preparing for a singing audition. Minutes later, he drove to Village Shalom, a nearby Jewish retirement facility, and shot 53-year-old Terry Laumano in the parking lot while she was visiting her elderly mother. Miller was arrested shortly after, found outside an elementary school. As police restrained him, he repeatedly shouted Heil Hitler. He showed no remorse, only regret that one of his victims, the teenager, wasn't Jewish. Investigators would later uncover a lifetime of extremist activity. Miller wasn't just a hate-motivated loner. He was a former military man, a failed politician, and the founder of two white supremacist militias, the Carolina Knights of the Ku Klux Klan and the White Patriot Party. In 1987, he mailed out a manifesto called the Declaration of War, listing Jews, Black Americans, and LGBTQ individuals as enemies. He signed it with a call for total racial war. During his 2015 trial, Miller chose to represent himself. The courtroom became a stage for his ideology. He distributed anti-Semitic pamphlets, questioned witnesses about their ethnicity, and used his closing arguments to rail against what he called Zionist-occupied government. The jury deliberated for only a short time before finding him guilty of capital murder, 3 counts of attempted murder, and multiple weapons charges. 8 days later, they recommended death. At sentencing, Miller was visibly gaunt and struggling to breathe from chronic emphysema, the disease he claimed had pushed him to act. He smirked in court, again praised Hitler, and said, "I regret killing that kid. He looked older. But if he'd been Jewish, I'd be fine with it." He was formally sentenced to death on November 10, 2015. But Kansas hadn't executed a prisoner in decades, and Miller would never face the needle. He died in prison on May 3, 2021, from natural causes. The tragedy left an indelible mark, not just on the families, but on the nation. "Dad, I'm sorry I didn't drive a Reed. Reed, your heart reaches me every day," tweeted Mindy Corporon, mother and daughter of 2 victims. She has since become a speaker against hate, turning private grief into public purpose. So what can we learn from a man like Miller, and how do we protect ourselves and our communities? First, never underestimate the quiet buildup of radicalization. Years of hateful rhetoric online can lead to real-world violence. Second, take all threats seriously, especially from individuals with access to weapons and a history of organized hate. And third, learn the warning signs. Obsession with conspiracy theories, dehumanizing language, and extremist group affiliation are all red flags. Justice was served, but it came too late for 3 innocent lives. In a country that prides itself on freedom and diversity, the real question lingers: how many more warnings do we need before we act against hate? Number 2. James Alex Fields Jr. A gray Dodge Challenger crept through a Virginia street, and within seconds, it turned a peaceful protest into a scene of blood and steel. Hate had finally found its accelerator. James Alex Fields Jr. wasn't an outsider to extremism. By his late teens, he was already obsessed with Adolf Hitler, drawing swastikas in notebooks and telling classmates that the magic happened at Nazi concentration camps. But it was on August 12, 2017, in Charlottesville, Virginia, that his radical beliefs became deadly. That day, white supremacists gathered for the Unite the Right rally to protest the removal of a Confederate statue. Counter-protesters, activists, students, and citizens showed up in numbers to reject racism and division. Fields came with a different purpose. He was seen earlier that morning holding a shield marked Vanguard America, a neo-Nazi group. Around 1:40 p.m., He drove his 2010 Dodge Challenger toward a packed pedestrian area. He paused, reversed, and then floored the gas. He plowed through a crowd of counter-protesters, ramming into vehicles, bodies, and bones. Heather Heyer, 32, was killed instantly. Dozens more were injured, including Star Peterson and Marcus Martin, who suffered long-term physical damage. Video of the impact spread across the world in minutes. Fields didn't stop to help. He reversed through more victims before speeding away, blood smeared across the front of his car. Police arrested him just 1 mile away. He cried when told someone had died, but investigators weren't swayed. His online presence was flooded with neo-Nazi propaganda and anti-Semitic memes. Under oath, Fields admitted that he drove into the crowd because of the perceived race, religion, and origin of the people standing there. It wasn't a panic, it was a decision. In state court, Fields was convicted of first-degree murder, multiple counts of malicious wounding, and hit-and-run. The jury didn't hesitate, life in prison, plus 419 years. Then came the federal charges, 29 counts of hate crimes, including the fatal attack on Heather Heyer. To avoid the death penalty, Fields entered a guilty plea. He was sentenced to life without parole. The courtroom was heavy as victims faced him one by one. Rosia Parker, injured in the attack, told him, "You could have done anything else, but you chose this." Heather's mother, Susan Bro, refused to demand his death. "It wouldn't bring my daughter back," she said. "Let him live and know what he did." Fields was sent to a federal medical prison. But the violence didn't stop there. In 2023, he was accused of threatening a guard with a weapon. His remorse never surfaced. He pays $100 a year in court-ordered restitution. Victims haven't seen $1. The attack triggered a national reckoning on racism, extremism, and the fragility of public safety. Fields didn't just take a life, he exposed how easily hate can turn a street into a war zone. And from that moment forward, protest security in America would never be the same. Violent ideology doesn't arrive with banners and guns, it creeps in quietly, through online forums, memes, and slogans. Once embedded, it metastasizes. Watch for the signs. Glorification of hate symbols, obsession with purity narratives, and increasing disdain for other races. Pay attention when young men idolize mass killers. These aren't just edgy opinions. They're warnings. Today, James Fields rots in a cell, but the legacy of his crime isn't confined to prison walls. Charlottesville became a mirror, forcing the country to confront what we let grow in the dark. And as that car sped forward, so did the consequences of collective silence. Not every weapon is held in the hand. Some are gripped at the wheel and fueled by belief systems far more deadly than any machine. Number 3, Dean Kapsulis. The street was quiet, the kind of residential calm where you hear your own footsteps. But in just minutes, that silence was replaced by the sound of a pickup truck accelerating, and a man's body being dragged beneath it. Dean Kapsulis was 54 when he turned a simple road dispute into a fatal, racially charged attack. It happened in Belmont, Massachusetts, on January 19, 2021. Kapsulis, white, was behind the wheel of a red Dodge pickup. The victim was Henry Tapia, 35, a black man and father of 3. The confrontation started with a common argument over a turn signal. Words were exchanged. But then Kapsulis turned around and shouted a racial slur. Tapia froze. Kapsulis climbed into his truck. Then, with no warning, he accelerated directly into Tapia, hitting him with full force. He dragged Tapia's body down the street, tires screeching, before fleeing the scene. Tapia was left bleeding and unconscious. He died at the hospital. The community was in shock. One witness, a Belmont resident, chased after Kapsulis' vehicle to jot down the license plate. 30 minutes later, Kapsulis returned and turned himself in. By then, the police already had what they needed. The investigation moved quickly. It revealed Kapsulis had a long history of reckless driving, 7 crashes, 18 speeding tickets, and 10 license suspensions. But this time, his actions weren't just reckless. They were criminals and targeted. Prosecutors brought not only murder charges, but also charges under Massachusetts Civil Rights Statute, recognizing the racial motive behind the killing. District Attorney Marian Ryan was direct. This was a senseless tragedy fueled by hate and anger. It was a hate crime. The message was clear. This would not be treated as just another traffic incident. The trial began in May 2023. Kapsulis claimed the death was an accident, but jurors didn't buy it. They saw the surveillance footage, heard from the witnesses, and listened to the evidence of a racial slur spoken moments before the attack. They convicted him on all counts, including second-degree murder, violation of constitutional rights, and assault with a dangerous weapon. Judge David Deacon handed down the sentence, life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. He described Capsulus's behavior as part of a lifelong tendency toward violence. In court, Tapia's fiancée Courtney Morton delivered a heartbreaking statement. "My son has to serve a life sentence without his father," she said, "because of the actions of this man." Their child, just 6 years old at the time, had already begun asking if people would hate him too. Capsulus apologized, but Tapia's cousin, Raul Felipe, said it didn't sound that sincere. The family had hoped for life without parole. They didn't get it, but they got a conviction that named hate as a driving force. This wasn't just about a turn signal. It was about the deep roots of racism and how it can explode in an instant. So what can we take away from Belmont's tragedy? Racism rarely comes up. It hides behind civility until the wrong word or moment brings it to light. A vehicle is not just transportation, it becomes a weapon when fueled by hate. And when bystanders step up, as one did to chase down a fleeing killer, justice has a fighting chance. Dean Capsulus now serves his time behind bars. But his act left more than a legal precedent. It left a community asking how far hate can travel on four wheels and who will be its next target. Number 4, John T. Ernest. It was a sunny Saturday morning in Southern California. Children played outside. Inside a synagogue, prayers rose like whispers. Then, within seconds, bullets pierced the silence and history was altered forever. On April 27, 2019, during Passover services at the Chabad of Poway Synagogue near San Diego, 19-year-old John Timothy Ernest walked in with a Smith & Wesson semi-automatic rifle, wearing a tactical vest packed with loaded magazines. He opened fire with hate as his ammunition. 8 to 10 shots were fired. 60-year-old Lori Gilbert Kay was struck while shielding her rabbi. She died on the synagogue floor. Rabbi Yisroel Goldstein lost a finger. An 8-year-old girl and her uncle were also wounded before the rifle jammed. That malfunction likely spared dozens more. A mosque in nearby Escondido. 7 worshippers slept inside. He used a flammable liquid and left graffiti praising the Christchurch mosque shooter. Fortunately, the fire was extinguished before lives were lost. After the synagogue shooting, Ernest fled in his car. An off-duty border patrol agent in the congregation fired at his vehicle. 2 miles away, Ernest pulled over, called 911, and confessed. "I shot up a synagogue because Jews are destroying the white race," he said, emotionless. His words matched those in the manifesto he posted online minutes before the attack, a hate-filled, anti-Semitic, white nationalist rant. "I only wish I'd killed more," he wrote. Authorities charged him with both state and federal crimes. On the state level, he pleaded guilty to murder, attempted murder, and arson of a place of worship, all with hate crime enhancements. On the federal level, he pleaded guilty to 113 counts under hate crime and civil rights laws, including the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act. On September 30, 2021, Ernest was sentenced in California State Court to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus 121 years and 16 additional years. On December 28, he received a second life sentence in federal court, with 30 more years. These sentences would run consecutively. He would never walk free again. In court, the pain of the survivors was raw. Rabbi Goldstein, still healing, told the shooter, "You tried to break us, but we're stronger than your bullets." Lori Gilbert Kay's daughter, Hannah, described the murder as white supremacist, bigoted, hate-motivated violence. Her sister, Ellen Edwards, stared Ernest down, "We want you to rot in prison. May your life be hell." The case ignited national outrage. But beneath the headlines were reminders that evil often grows in silence. Ernest was a straight-A student, a pianist, raised in a loving household. His parents condemned his actions, saying, "His beliefs were informed by people we do not know and ideas we do not hold." Yet online, he had found a community that welcomed hate, cheered on murderers, and weaponized loneliness. So what lessons emerge from Poway? Online extremism doesn't always scream, it whispers. It grooms, isolates, and radicalizes through memes and message boards. Houses of worship are not immune, they are symbols, and in a divided world, symbols become targets. And when violence strikes, communities must act together in vigilance, in truth, and in memory of those lost. John T. Ernest sits behind bars for the rest of his life. But his attack left more than scars. It raised a haunting question. How many more will be radicalized before anyone notices? Sometimes the most dangerous weapons are not the ones in hand, but the ideologies quietly taking root in a mind left unguarded. Number 5. Jared Powell. He was just collecting cans to help support his family. On that quiet sidewalk in East Harlem, Yaupan Ma couldn't have known that a brutal storm was about to descend, not from the sky, but from hate. On April 23, 2021, 61-year-old Yaupan Ma, a Chinese immigrant, was attacked from behind while pushing a cart filled with recyclables. His attacker, 49-year-old Jared Powell, charged up to him without warning. In a flash, Ma was knocked to the ground. What followed was pure savagery. Powell stomped on Ma's head over and over again, then kicked his face and neck, long after the victim had stopped moving. The assault was captured on surveillance footage. There were no words exchanged, no robbery, just targeted racial violence. Ma sustained a traumatic brain injury and was placed on life support. For 8 months, he remained in a vegetative state, never regaining consciousness. He died in December 2021, his life stolen in slow motion. Powell was arrested just days after the attack, thanks to the video evidence. But when questioned, he denied responsibility, telling reporters, "I didn't assault anyone." Then he added that he'd been attacked the day before by 2 Korean or Japanese men, suggesting a twisted logic for his own violence. There was no police report, no evidence, just race-based blame. Initially charged with attempted murder, Powell's charges were upgraded after Ma's death. He ultimately pleaded guilty to manslaughter in the first degree as a hate crime. In his plea, he admitted he attacked Ma specifically because he was Asian. He was targeted for no reason other than his race, Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg said. This was a brutal, unprovoked hate crime. On March 31, 2023, Powell was sentenced to 22 years in state prison and 5 years of post-release supervision. The courtroom was quiet. There was no dramatic breakdown. Just a man in prison garb, accepting the weight of a sentence far lighter than the loss he caused. Ma's family accepted the plea, knowing it would spare them the agony of a public trial. While this will not bring back Mr. Yaupan Ma, it is a significant sentence that we can accept, said family spokesperson Carlin Chan. It represents closure and a measure of justice. The attack on Yaupan Ma wasn't an isolated event. It was part of a chilling surge in anti-Asian hate crimes across New York and the United States, fueled by ignorance, misinformation, and fear during the COVID-19 pandemic. Powell's case became a national symbol of that hatred and of a justice system forced to confront it. So what can we learn from this? Hate doesn't always wear a mask or carry a weapon. Sometimes it walks beside us, waiting for an excuse. Being silent in the face of small prejudices allows them to grow unchecked. And when communities unite, reporting, witnessing, refusing to look away, justice has a chance to prevail. Jared Powell will spend over 2 decades in prison, but for Yaupan Ma's family, the sentence is forever. A husband is gone. A life ended by boots and bias. The most devastating blows are often not the loudest, but the ones that say, "You don't belong here." And they echo far beyond the street where they were delivered. Number 6. Jose Torres and Kayla Norton. Balloons floated in the summer breeze. Laughter echoed across the yard. Then the trucks came, flying Confederate flags, loaded shotguns, and something more dangerous, the intent to terrorize. In July 2015, a children's birthday party in Douglasville, Georgia, turned into a scene of targeted racial hatred. Melissa Alford hosted the event to celebrate her grandson's 6th birthday, surrounded by friends, family, and children. What should have been a joyful Saturday was shattered by the arrival of multiple pickup trucks bearing Confederate flags and armed white supremacists. Among them were 26-year-old Jose Ismael Torres and 25-year-old Kayla Ray Norton. Both were part of a group that called itself Respect the Flag. But their 2-day drunken rampage had little to do with heritage and everything to do with hate. That day, they stopped near the party and began shouting racial slurs and death threats. Torres brandished a shotgun. Norton loaded it. The weapon was aimed at partygoers, men, women, and children alike. Witnesses later testified that one of the group members laughed when told there were children present. "Leave them. They can get one, too," was the response. The terror was so immediate that attendees rushed to shelter screaming kids while frantically calling 911. Footage captured the truck circling, police forming a human barrier, and panicked parents pushing children to safety. Torres and Norton were arrested after a multi-agency investigation reviewed cell phone videos and eyewitness accounts. They were charged with multiple felonies including aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, making terroristic threats, and violating Georgia's street gang terrorism statute. The state lacked a formal hate crime law at the time, but Judge William McLean was clear. This was motivated by racial hatred. During sentencing, Torres remained silent, eyes downcast. Norton sobbed and said, "That's not me. I accept responsibility." The court wasn't moved. Torres was sentenced to 20 years, 13 to serve in prison. Norton received 15 years, 6 to serve. Both were banned from Douglas County upon release. The courtroom heard not just from the offenders, but from the traumatized. Melissa Alford expressed fear of retaliation and lasting anxiety. "They cried because they got caught," she later told reporters. Haisha Bryant, another guest, forgave them but described the deep impact on her children. "I had to explain racism to a 10-year-old. He asked if people hated him because he was brown." Prosecutors linked the incident to the national backdrop, just weeks after white supremacist Dylan Roof killed 9 black worshippers in Charleston, South Carolina. As public backlash led to Confederate symbols being removed, the Respect the Flag group took to the streets in defiance. But instead of a protest, they launched an attack. This case carried lasting echoes because it made one thing undeniable: the danger of unchecked racism doesn't just exist online or in fringe meetings, it sometimes shows up in your neighborhood, pointing a gun at your child's birthday. 3 chilling truths remain. Hate doesn't always wear a hood. When flags become signals of threat, they lose all meaning. And silence, even bystanders, feeds the fire. Today, Torres and Norton served their time in Georgia's prison system, their tears in court captured by national media and reposted across true crime YouTube compilations. But what they did left a stain far deeper than a sentence. Not every hate crime ends in a headline. But when justice is served, it must echo louder than the engine of any truck. Number 7. Amber Geiger. The couch was his refuge after a long day, a bowl of ice cream in hand, music playing softly. The door opened, not with a key, but with a gun, and everything changed. On the evening of September 6, 2018, 26-year-old Botham Jean, an accountant and beloved church singer, was in his own apartment in Dallas, Texas. Without warning, his front door swung open. Amber Geiger, a 31-year-old white off-duty police officer, stepped inside. She lived one floor below, but claimed she believed she had entered her own apartment. Seeing Jean, she drew her service weapon and fired twice. Both bullets struck his chest. He was unarmed, wearing lounge clothes, watching TV. The place was clearly not hers. Yet, when the 911 call played in court, it revealed panic, not for him, but for herself. "I'm going to lose my job," she said. She never tried to resuscitate him. Initial charges of manslaughter quickly escalated after public outrage and evidence reviews. Geiger admitted on the stand that she intended to kill when she pulled the trigger. But was it fear or recklessness? Prosecutors brought forward troubling digital evidence, derogatory jokes about Martin Luther King Jr., mocking messages about black colleagues, and aggressive memes shared on social media. Just 2 days before the shooting, Geiger had texted a friend that she was the same as a supposedly hate-motivated dog. In another exchange, she complained about working with black officers. Prosecutors argued that while she didn't wake up that day planning to kill a black man, her views influenced how quickly she resorted to lethal force. In court, the racial undertones of the case couldn't be ignored. This was not just a mistaken apartment, it was a stark example of what happens when implicit bias meets authority and a gun. The jury was asked to decide whether this was a tragic error or a criminal act. They chose the latter. On October 1, 2019, after 5 hours of deliberation, the jury found her guilty of murder. The sentencing the next day delivered another twist. Prosecutors requested 28 years, one for each year of the victim's life. The jury gave her 10. Some considered it merciful, others saw it as another soft verdict in a system that rarely holds police accountable. Yet what followed stunned the courtroom and the nation. Brent Jean, Botham's younger brother, took the stand and said, "I forgive you. I don't even want you to go to jail. I want the best for you." He then hugged the woman who killed his brother. While many praised the gesture, others argued it shifted focus from systemic injustice to individual forgiveness. Jean's mother, Allison, was resolute. Forgiveness is for her, but justice must be for my son. Dallas needs to clean up its house. Geiger appealed the conviction, but it was upheld in 2021. She now serves her 10-year sentence in Texas, eligible for parole in 2026. A civil court later awarded the Jean family nearly $100 million in damages, a symbolic victory, but a reminder of a loss that can't be priced. So, what do we carry forward from Apartment 1478? Mistakes behind a badge are not exempt from consequence. Bias, when denied, is often the trigger. And justice, to mean anything, must be consistent, even when the gun is in the hands of law enforcement. Botham Jean died not on a battlefield or a dark alley, but in his living room. And maybe that's what makes the silence that followed so deafening. What if I told you, these were just the ones that got caught? The truth is, for every hate crime that makes headlines, there are dozens buried in silence, unsolved, unspoken, unseen. What dark secrets lie in small-town police files? What names never make it to court? And who's walking free, right now, planning the next attack? The next episode will take you to the stories no one dares to tell, where justice slips and terror hides behind familiar faces. So if you're ready to go deeper, to confront what most people scroll past, subscribe Justice Reversed, tap that notification bell, and join us as we uncover the cases that still haunt America. Because the most disturbing stories are the ones you haven't heard yet.